We're here at Houston Media Source with Drug Crimes and Politics, brought to you by Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Here with us is Dean Becker, noted voice over the airwaves. You can hear him live here in Houston on 90.1 KPFT. He'll be showing some clips later that we're looking forward to seeing from all the different conferences that you travel to and different people that he interviews while at these conferences. So welcome, Dean.
Thank you, Bindu. It's nice to be on the set with you. I try to call in most weeks. You've maybe heard me if you're a regular viewer. I find it important that in this time of, quote, terror, that we take time to look around at the terror we're inflicting on our own people through this drug war. Some 1.8 million of us arrested every year for little baggies of plant products. It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't at all. And in fact, there are a lot of things that aren't making sense right now as we speak. We're on the eve of the Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment being voted upon either late tonight or tomorrow, perhaps, in the U.S. House of Representatives. And as they're about to vote on this, even today, 6 dispensaries were raided in L.A., medical marijuana dispensaries. A lot of people think that the Hinchy-Rohrabacher may not make a difference. It's a small incremental step in the war on drugs. But if you ask any medical marijuana patient in those states that have legalized and gone through all the hoops to make up, dispensaries, to make up token ID cards, and have very many policies in place in order to ensure that this is a legal process, you ask any patient in one of those states, and they'll say that this is a very valuable amendment. So it is now time to act as a citizen and call on your representative. Call them, email them, just raise your voice. Even if they are known to have voted for the Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment, call them to make sure that they don't miss the vote, because someone missing the vote who has previously done so before is basically a no vote for us. Last year, 163 representatives voted for it, and now with a new Congress, a new House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, who has previously voted for it before, hopefully we'll see a big change in Hinchy-Rohrabacher. And for those of you who don't know, it is the Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment to the Science State Justice Appropriations Bill. Basically says that any federal income, any federal monies taken from the taxpayers' income cannot be used for the DEA to exploit these medical marijuana dispensaries or to raid on, conduct raids, arrest patients, arrest their property, arrest any plants, anything basically in these dispensaries. And any other news in the Hinchy-Rohrabacher or medical marijuana movement there that you've seen lately?
I was watching C-SPAN today, trying to see if there was anything going on. They were dealing with Homeland Security and all that sort of stuff, and didn't get around to it, at least while I was watching. But I think it, you talk about these dispensaries, and many people talk about them as being profit centers. The owners are millionaires, and all of this type thing. And I'm certain that that's true in some cases. But the scenario, the means of providing this demands that people risk their lives and at least their future, certainly, because, as you say, they raided 6 dispensaries even today. And but the scenario, the means by which these drugs are distributed, is the desire, the situation created by the federal prohibition. It forces people into this quasi-black market situation. It forces a situation where the cost of this product, before marijuana became illegal, it sold for $1 a pound through pharmaceutical agencies. You could get the indica, high-grade stuff, for $5 a pound. And yet now the situation is it's closer to $5,000 a pound for the high-grade stuff. And why is that? Because of the federal government.
Right, because of the black market it's created. And with these dispensaries, you said, some people aren't making profit off of it, or some people are making profit off of it. There is going to be those bad seeds. How many cartels are making profit off of it under the illegal systems? $billion trade. Also, we don't have the good professor with us here. He'd know more about the legality of the situation. But in California, I believe, and I'm not sure what other states. They're basically saying that any dispensaries, landlords of those buildings can be convicted or sued or whatnot for just housing these dispensaries, basically for being their legitimate business owner selves by renting out their property to a legitimate business.
Well, in fact, they can have their property confiscated, forfeited to the government under these, quote, guidelines. What this is a scare tactic. It's another bit of extortion, if you will, a shakedown to go after these clubs in any way they can. In the history, not just the 10 years in California since Prop 215 where it's been legal, but in the history of mankind, no one has ever died from this product. The government hangs on to this day, do have a symbiotic relationship with the criminals. There was a situation in Houston just last week. Several homes were raided, several different nights for growing hydroponic marijuana in these homes. And what they've done with this is to take that high-grade quality product off the market right at the time when the Mexicans are harvesting their harvest this year, and they're raising the price for the cartels, for the Mexican cartels that are going to be bringing their harvest up here in the next few weeks.
Right. Well, you take any product, there's obviously a demand, and you take half of that supply out, what's going to do to the other half of the supply that's actually available? It's just going to increase.
Right.
I was going to mention this later, but something on the internet that I saw you had written about was 2 counterindicating stories about cocaine.
Just last week, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Chronicle had 2 stories side by side, basically, in the online section, and they the first one said government shows that cocaine deliveries are going down, that they're being successful. The story just an inch away said record cocaine bust, 11 tons. It's whether they do well, whether they fail, they always need more money. Over the lifetime of the drug war, we've given $1 trillion to law enforcement, the criminal justice system, and we've given $10 trillion to the terrorists, the cartels, and the violent gangs. So it's such a waste of money, such a waste.
Wow, it is such a waste. And for someone who does their research and kind of looks into this on a daily basis, I've always heard that it's a $40 billion industry, but when you think about it, it does get up into the trillions.
Well, sure, over the lifetime. I mean, this thing's been going on nigh unto 100 years now.
Yeah, it's almost a century.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and we have this caller on the line. So.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, what y'all talking about? No, I was drinking the channel.
Do you have a question, caller?
Yeah, I was drinking the channels, and then I saw y'all talking about there was some raids, what y'all talking about?
Oh, okay. Thanks for your question. Well, we're talking about drugs, crime, and politics. So, anyone who would like to, who has any pertinent questions, last show we had some great questions. We had the grand jury foreman, 2 grand jury foremans of Houston calling in. We've got the number at the bottom of the screen. But, yeah, if anyone has any questions about drug policy reform in general, how you can get involved, or if you'd like to speak to Dean, please give us a call. I guess we're going to go ahead and go with the first clip that we have. And this is Lynn Paltrow from the Advocates for Pregnant Women. And you met her at the HIV methamphetamine conference in Salt Lake City, Utah?
Right. That was earlier this year. She spoke to a gathering of, I don't know, about 100 people, several breakout rooms, a huge symposium, probably 100 panels. And she attracted quite a crowd, considering, and she speaks with a little bit of humor, but with great acumen and understanding. I draw the parallel, if you will, to the hysteria about the crack babies some 5 and 8 years ago, and how the meth hysteria has kind of latched onto that same baton.
The new drug of the week, I guess, especially for the media to intent upon. And
right, but I think you'll enjoy that. If you have any calls, please give us a call after this is over. We'll be glad to talk about it, maybe allay some of your fears about this drug war.
Okay. Let's go to the clip.
I'm going to start just with a little bit of overall policy and then focus more on the kinds of policies we work on which involve drug use and pregnant women. But I think you heard in one of the opening the notion that crystal meth is a good drug in the sense that people use drugs that actually do something. We also live in a culture which sends a very conflicting message about addiction because apparently it's a really good thing. As you will see, it's good to be a Dior addict. It's good to be a BlackBerry addict. It's good, as my son is, to be a Mac addict. We sell all kinds of products. It's used in advertising. It's affirmed over and over again. Children's computer games, golf addict, love addict. This one's a little bit of a mixed message, I have to say. Great Dane addict, to be fair. Certified cat addict, fishing addict. Baseball addicts are good. Video game addicts are good. Addicted to reading. It's great to be addicted. Speed addict. I love this. This is, for those of you who can't see this, it's a car speeding. It's a video game. And then being hooked is also terrific. Hooked on Mad Magazine. Hooked on hankies. Hooked on the outdoors. Hooked on fly fishing. That's a pun. Hooked on, I think this is a kind of Texas kind of legalized gambling. Hooked on Hebrew. To be fair, hooked on Jesus. And the most pernicious of all, hooked on phonics. So, if you look at what's being said, it's rather confusing. And we pick certain things to go after, I think, too, as part of distraction. That if we focus on particular drugs and particular people who use certain kinds of drugs, it distracts our attention from the larger social issues on which we share values. The fact that 46 million people don't have health insurance. The fact that there's no parity for mental health and drug treatment. The fact that we are not a country that actually provides services or programs that value families. Women who give birth don't get paid maternity leave. We're one of 2 countries in the world like that. So that we use issues, hot-button issues like drugs, particularly meth right now, or abortion or gay marriage, so that we can distract attention from the things that we share, like the fact that we're losing, for example, our pensions. But to look specifically at meth and the issues we work on, I want to give a little context. When crack became usable, when cocaine became usable in the form of crack, there was an almost instant outcry and panic, and this is the bad, that it would lead to crack kids and crack babies. So you had coverage in Time magazine in the 1990s, crack kids, their mothers use drugs, and now it's the children who suffer. Labeling, you have the inside of the Time magazine, their kids are small, innocent legacies. If somebody's innocent, somebody else has to be what? Guilty, right? And you get to the story itself, and now as the face becomes more menacing and the storyline says these kids are going to be in school with your kids, the skin color gets darker. And these are damaged kids. They're going to need your compassion. Now, if you read far enough into this article, it said there's no such thing. The experts actually said these are poverty kids, that there is no syndrome that can be associated with exposure to crack prenatally. The label is inappropriate. And yet you had stories in newspapers saying they were. And the result was not an influx of funding or treatment, but they started to arrest pregnant women as child abusers before they had ever given birth. So Kimberly Hardy gives birth to a child who tests positive for cocaine. The baby is healthy. She's charged with delivery of drugs to a minor. Britta Smith gives birth to a child who tests positive. She's also charged. She knew she had a problem. She went to the phone book, looked up every treatment program in Virginia. They all said, we'll put you on a waiting list because you'll be paying with Medicaid. There was no waiting list to be charged with child abuse. Crystal Ferguson goes for help in South Carolina, and she becomes one of 40 women who's subjected to a program of secretly testing pregnant women, turning that information over to the police and coordinating their in-hospital arrest. These are some BBC films of the women being taken out in literally chains and shackles. This was one other story from the New York Times, front page around crack. I can't say for sure it's crack, but I've never seen so many kids functioning at such low levels. And again, if you read the article carefully enough, it turned out that none of the kids in this classroom had been exposed prenatally to crack, to cocaine, but they had been children who had suffered poverty, witnessed murders, and other traumas. And thanks, Sheila Murphy wrote that letter to the New York Times saying this has nothing to do with prenatal exposure to cocaine. What we were afraid of and what we started to see with meth was that you would have the same kind of reaction. A few years ago, the 30 leading national researchers on prenatal exposure to cocaine did a public letter saying there's no such thing as a crack baby. That label doesn't fit because there is no particular syndrome of harm associated with prenatal exposure to cocaine. You started to see using crystal meth one time can cause damage. Now, this is out when there's been absolutely no controlled research. This is already out there. This is the image of a child in such terrible circumstances, born to a meth-addicted mom. Sheriffs call meth worst U.S. drug. And then it says here, meth use by pregnant women can lead to birth defects. Well, birth defects generally refer to teratogenic drugs that cause permanent irreversible damage, like thalidomide, that cause children to be born missing limbs. There's no evidence that cocaine or meth causes that at all. A handout that I found online from a Wyoming treatment program, What Pregnant Women Should Know. It says, your child could be hyperactive, have ADD, learning disabilities, unprovoked fits of anger. I would like to see one evidence-based study. I'm going to have the unprovoked fit of anger from reading this. The only research that has been controlled and done so far by Barry Lester seems to find an association with lower birth weight babies. Yes, that is not healthy, but it is not of a different order or significantly different from cigarettes, from all kinds of drugs, from poverty and other influences. This is another fact sheet I found online. I like this one. It says, you could affect brain, spinal cord, and my favorite down here is you could get a club foot. Now, if you could get a club foot from prenatal exposure to meth, we'd have a lot of club foots out there. I just have to honor Luciano and the Harm Reduction Project, because what they did with the first conference and this one is try to get ahead of the curve, to say we are not going to let people develop policies based on mythology, misinformation, and misreporting. It has to be evidence-based. And at a time where there's an assault on science in this country, it's especially important to insist on evidence-based everything. And we all get very isolated. So, the birthing movement likes to say we have, a third of all women have C-sections. They're unnecessary. They're not based on science. We're the only kind of medicine where policy is based not on science. And I say, yeah, but what about drug policy? And what about the other things? The good is also that every leading medical group in the country has a policy that says we should not respond to the problem of whatever the drug is, drug use during pregnancy through the criminal justice system. And it's not because they're radical feminists at the March of Dimes or the AMA. It's because they understand that if you threaten people with arrest for seeking help or admitting a problem, they're not going to get that help, or they're not going to give you the information to enable you to give them that help. So it deters not drug use, but health care. And I would point out, as I'll come to, if you put women in jail, what do you think is going to happen to them? The Amnesty International, women who are pregnant and deliver in jail deliver in chains and shackles in most places. Only 2 states in this country prohibit having women shackled during labor and delivery. If you have women in shackles, they can't be positioned to give birth. They can't get untied in time for an emergency C-section. They fall over because they're not balanced. We're going to put women in jail where they will give birth to children on the floor of their jail cells because the prison health system is so much about dehumanization and torture, not about care. Do not respond to this problem through the criminal justice system. And the other good is 2 years ago we worked with over 90 leading medical doctors, researchers, and treatment providers who early on were willing to sign a public statement, and I'm going to be asking you all to sign a public statement in a few minutes, saying, please do not rush to judgment. Please do not assume that do not create labels of meth babies. We haven't done the research. It's likely the research will be similar to what we found with cocaine. And although it hasn't stopped the bad, it certainly has lessened it. We've seen less use of these terms, so getting out front and early does make a difference.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics, sponsored by Drug Policy Forum of Texas. We just watched a clip from Lynn Paltrow of Advocates for Pregnant Women speaking about the women use of methamphetamine during pregnancy, the cover-up of the war on drugs, and how it is overexposed to the extent that it is overexposed falsely. Evidence, science is used against the war on drugs instead of for it. That was something that she mentioned, and it's absolutely true. You have to look at the study that's been done and look to the intent of it. She mentioned a study that showed that one-time use of methamphetamine can, adversely affect the baby, but that's not true to any extent. And you were actually at this conference, and
I was. Again, it was a gathering, I think, of approximately 1,000 people from around the country, around the world. In fact, a few foreigners, if you will, were there. And what I felt compelling was the fact that there was so much truth available about this, much along the lines of what Lynn Paltrow was saying, that steps outside the government propaganda box, if you will. And what we have to stop and realize is this need to demonize drug users is so necessary for this drug war to continue. I'm told we have a caller. You want to get that? Maybe we can join the discussion with them.
All right, let's go ahead. Welcome, caller, to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yeah, why don't you think that drugs are bad?
What's that?
Well, turn your TV down.
Sorry, I just hung up on them.
Okay, well, that was feeding back. But I think the question was, why do we not think drugs are bad, if I heard right? And look, I'm all for controlling drugs. I'm all for putting them in the hands of legitimate authority, dispensing them to adults, I think per their request. It is our right, and our inherent right in this country, to put into our own bodies whatever we want. But I want to keep them out of the hands of kids. And I am also a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and that's our #1 goal, is to take control away from the gangsters and the cartels. Heck, 3 million Afghanis are growing opium on the mountainsides now, selling it through the Taliban, using that money to buy more weapons to kill our soldiers. I can't think of a crazier policy than that. Now, insofar as, I did a lot of drugs in my youth. I lived through it, didn't have to go to prison, didn't have to go to treatment, and I learned from it. And I want to share that information with people to tell them that, moderation is the key. Moderation is the key to any drug, whether that be alcohol or any other drug. And what we have to do is, we have this situation now, it's called the Controlled Substances Act, which has no control to it. It hands the control to the gangsters. And I want to give it to Merck and to CVS Pharmacy. I want to give it to your doctor. I want to have legitimate, regulated, known dosages available to adults. That's what I want.
Right, and especially these medications to be, especially like medical marijuana, more research to be done on it so that pharmaceutical companies can make use of it and so people can make use of it.
Right.
It looks like, do we have another caller? Hopefully it was the person that called back. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yes, ma'am. I have a comment for the sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, you said that the gang members was hurting the soldiers or whatever, and President Bush doing the same thing?
I'm not sure I'm following you, sir. So repeat again, or?
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Yeah, I think they hung up. Yeah, I'm not really sure what he was asking.
Something about the gangs and the soldiers, and isn't President Bush doing the same thing? Look, I don't like any aspect of this drug war. I don't like the federal government's busting in the doors of the dispensaries, going after legitimate medical marijuana patients and their providers. And I don't like the fact that kids are busted daily here in Houston. We fill our jails, they're over full, and the majority of them are in there for drug possession, empty pipes maybe, empty bag, a bad urine test. And it's so full, we're now shipping hundreds of our prisoners to Louisiana, to a private prison, And these private prisons are nothing but profit centers. And they're going to give these people the least amount of food and the worst housing and the least medical support.
Right. Well, as Lynn Paltrow said, that prison is basically supposed to be a dehumanizing experience, and especially when a woman who is pregnant, going through birth, and there's only 2 states that prohibit women giving birth in prison from being shackled down. That's probably one of the most unhealthy and most dangerous things I've heard. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then arresting the woman before, basically one of the many acute, and very humorous, as he said, and knowledgeable things she said was that women are being arrested based on drug tests even before the kid is born. What is this going to lead to? This is going to lead, they're being secretly drug tested. It's going to women not seeking the proper medical care they need under fear of being arrested or incarcerated just for drug use. They should be able to have the health care for that child, and regardless, just this whole drug war is a hoax, and as soon as people can realize that.
Well, we
do have another caller, so let's go ahead and take that. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yeah, how y'all doing? You having a good night?
Yeah, and you?
I'm having an all right night. I just had a comment to make because I wanted to know what y'all think about. I had the story for y'all. One day we were driving and we got illegally pulled over by UH officials, and we got mistreated with unnecessary roughness. And I don't know if y'all aware of that, but they were going over their jurisdiction.
Well, that sort of mistreatment happens all the time. Were they suspecting you of drug possession?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is the means. It is the grease on the wheel. It is the way they go about this. I
heard because they're low-time cops, and then they try to make a name for themselves, so they try to do a lot of work. They try to put in work, you know what I'm saying, to get their rank. So you don't talk about low.
I do. I know what you're saying, and that's so true. Each year in America, I think it's now up to 1.8 million of your fellow citizens are arrested for drug possession. That's about 1 every 20 seconds all year long. Mm-hmm. And what we have to do is stand up for something more legitimate. Why?
Yeah, you're right, because, I'm from that first world Texas. You know what I'm saying? Out there, it's rough, and they kind of fixing up the streets, though. And they, like you said, they're doing a lot of, when they run up in their house, the raid or whatever.
Yes.
And they're doing a lot of illegal seizures in the house. And they're beating up guys, because when they catch them, they don't catch them for nothing.
Well, and if, right, very little, if anything, somebody's memory of a drug, who knows? They don't care. They're perfectly willing to take you in.
Have you heard about the cocaine cowboys?
I have not.
It was the 1970s down in Miami, where it was they were the #1 cause of all the cocaine to Florida.
Okay. Well, no, I think I do recall now that you reminded me.
And then at that time, it was the #1 murder capital of the world.
Well, the thing is, violence follows the drug war around.
Also, money does too, and then greed leads to all death.
Right.
Right.
Well, let's get back to talking about the question at hand and everything.
Because, I'm talking about First World Texas. First World Productions, First World Records.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I think we got a commercial thrown in there.
I know. He was trying to advertise on the side. All right. But he did bring, the point that he mentioned, that violence begets violence with something that's illegal and anything that's on the black market. There's no regulation. There's no any type of regulation involved in that. And law enforcement against prohibition is something you briefly mentioned that you were a part of, you're a spokesperson for. But the reason that they kind of set themselves aside is that they're actual former officers who have been on the front lines of the drug war, who have seen all this and know that prohibition is just plain not working.
Well, it is the Criminal Empowerment Act is what it is. Mm-hmm. Before drug prohibition, you reach back to 1913, before the passage of the Harrison Narcotics Act, there were no drug gangs, children weren't using, there were no overdoses, there was none of this violence. Osama bin Laden's grandfather was a farmer. You know what I'm saying? And but not growing opium. Well, maybe he was, but they've been growing opium over there a long time. But the black market wasn't there.
But we weren't supporting, you know, the bad guys out there. We weren't supporting terrorists. We weren't supporting drug cartels in Colombia. And when we get back, we're going to have another clip from Dean about Plan Colombia, and we look forward to that. And we'll see you guys when we get back from the break.
Do you suffer from fear of losing your election? Are you terrified that voters will discover you've done nothing to improve their lives? Maybe it's time you talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex. In clinical trials, Incarcerex has been shown effective at reducing election-related anxieties by making voters think you're doing something about the drug problem. It's simplistic and fast-acting. If your problems continue or get worse, you can always double or triple your dose of Incarcerex. Whether it's addiction, therapeutic use, or just casual use, there's an Incarcerex plan for every American. Best of all, taxpayers, not you, will foot the bill. So talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex today. Common side effects include loss of civil liberties, police corruption, racial injustice, increased terrorism, threat of HIV and AIDS, and violent crime. Bloated prisons are also a common side effect. Stop taking Incarcerex if bloating lasts longer than 20 years. If you're trying to balance the budget, keep families together, or protect human rights, Incarcerex may not be right for you. Do not mix Incarcerex with the Constitution or common sense. So start taking Incarcerex and keep pretending you're doing something about the drug problem.
Hi, welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics, sponsored by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. And we're speaking here with Dean Becker from KPFT, and really nationally you have over 70 radio stations now, by now.
Well, I have broadcast on more than 70.
Okay.
Many of them are college stations, and a lot of my programmers graduate, and I lose the connection, if you will.
I see.
And I think we're down in somewhere in the low 50s at the moment. I got to get back to work.
Oh, no. Well, it's the summertime, so
yeah,
hopefully in September or August you'll rise back up there. And we're going to get to a clip pretty soon here, but I would be amiss if I didn't mention a couple of things that are coming up here. First of all, mentioned at the beginning of the show, very, very important and very dear to Houstonians and anyone who is interested in medical marijuana for their state. The Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment will be voted on. It's either being voted on or has been voted on today. I seriously doubt it. You said you watched C-SPAN all day today.
Right. It was looking like it would be tomorrow.
A lot of blathering on. Yeah, so possibly tomorrow, definitely this week, will be voted on. Please call your representative's office in the D.C. There's a 202 number for the D.C. switchboard. There's also a toll-free number. Check out mpp.org, LEAP.org. We'll probably have it as well. Is it LEAP.cc?
LEAP.cc.
Okay. LEAP.cc. Any major drug policy reform website will probably have it, but it would restrict the federal government from funding money going to raiding medical marijuana dispensaries in the 12 states that have legalized it. So that is coming up, and at 10:30 Central Time, the Colbert Report, either tonight or tomorrow night. Aaron Houston, the Legislative and Government Affairs Director for Marijuana Policy Project, will be on the Colbert Report, so that should be interesting. The segment that we have coming up here is going to be on Plan Colombia from San Ho-Tree, and should we go ahead and roll it?
I wanted to share something real quick. We were talking about LEAP. I kind of want to address that. We're approaching some 9,000 members now.
Oh, wow.
We have, current and former policemen, police chiefs. We've got, we lost Eddie Ellison. He was the former head of Scotland Yard Drug Division. He passed on about 6 months ago. And we still have Gustavo de Grief, who was the Attorney General for the nation of Colombia.
Okay.
And that's what Sanjo is talking about, Sanjo Tree.
Okay.
The situation down there, how we've invested some $4 billion, and yet there's more cocaine, more coca, more problems than ever before.
Right. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
I think it's too early to talk about alternative development when you're talking about regions of the world that have never had basic development. And so the United States has been demanding that these peasant farmers who live in very remote areas stop growing things like coca and opium poppies and marijuana and grow instead hundreds of kilos of fruits and vegetables to transport in vehicles they don't have over roads that literally don't exist, to sell in markets, both domestic and export, they don't have access to. And even if they did, to compete against an international global economy, that's to say cheap imports from agribusiness, very often subsidized by our tax dollars, against which these farmers don't stand a chance. Right? What farmer in Kansas or California or Virginia would grow tons of corn or soybean if they had no vehicles, no markets, no roads? Who farms to go out of business? And that's what we've been expecting these farmers to do, and they haven't been doing it. They've gone back to planting coca, or they've become displaced, or they've joined the illegal armed actors, the guerrillas in Colombia or the paramilitary death squads in Colombia. And so this has been a dismal failure. One of the reasons for that is that there's simply too much land in this world, ungoverned spaces, where there isn't a whole lot of state presence or police presence to stop you from putting a seed in the ground and coming up with an illicit crop that's going to be able to feed your family in ways much better than growing conventional crops. This is an image from NASA. This is a nighttime satellite compilation of different population centers. So it measures light output. It's skewed towards societies that have access to electricity, but nonetheless it gives you a good sense of where the major population centers are. And for the past 5 years, the United States government has spent more than $4.5 billion trying to eradicate coca from this area in Colombia. As you can see, it's fairly dark there. There's not a whole lot of population centers. Similarly, in Bolivia and Peru and southern Colombia, with these coca-growing regions, there's very little state presence. And if by some miracle we're able to get rid of coca from the Amazon and the Andean regions, there's always sub-Saharan Africa, there's Asia. Coca is a plant that grows in many different soils and climates. Before World War II, Indonesia was a major exporter of cocaine. There were plantations on Taiwan, in Iwo Jima, Hawaii, you name it. And so we've been trying to stamp out this crop. And all we've been able to do is push it around, the balloon effect. You squeeze on one end of the balloon and it pops out the other end. Or Senator Ted Stevens once called it whack-a-mole. We've been trying to beat this mole down one hole and it pops up another, and it keeps going around and around and around. Unfortunately, that has a lot of serious collateral damage and human consequences. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Well, this is a simple prohibition chart. Shows you the price of an ounce of gold. This is probably 2003 prices. Gold has shot up quite a bit, but nonetheless, it gives you a sense of marijuana and gold having the same price. It's kind of silly. This is the other evil bush. Actually, coca's not evil at all. I'll talk more about that. Certainly not in the Bolivian context. It's actually quite a good thing. In Colombia, it's more problematic. But we've been trying to attack this plant using crop dusters in Colombia. This is the main instrument of our policies. And we've sprayed more than 1.7 million acres of Colombia. This is the second most biodiverse country in the world. It's led to basically a scorched earth policy. This is a very powerful, broad-spectrum herbicide. You can buy a very diluted form of it in your hardware store called Roundup. And even that comes with huge warning labels and a spray bottle applicator that says spray the one weed you're trying to kill. We're dumping this by air over vast stretches of land in Colombia. Even though we sprayed a lot of area in Colombia, Colombia's a very big country. It's the size of Texas and California combined. So is Peru, so is Bolivia. They're each huge land masses. This is what the United States government says we're doing in Colombia. Spraying very low altitudes, very precise, precision, GPS-guided spray plane. We're only hitting the coca. And when this plane leaves the field of vision here, it looks like it's spraying some kind of rain, but in fact, it's vaporizing. It's forming a cloud. And that cloud drifts all over the place. It destroys a lot of food crops, a lot of the environment. It goes over water sources and people as well. Farmers and children are sometimes playing out in the fields or harvesting their crops or tending their crops. And there's no warning. It's hard to run out of the center of one of these giant gas clouds without inhaling several times. Here's the plane that's flying again, very high altitude, much higher than it's supposed to. It's supposed to fly basically at head top level, but this isn't Kansas. These are very a lot of palm trees and rough terrain. Heading for a house. Here's one flying right over a campesino's house. Again, there's very little coca being grown here. This is slash and burn agriculture. These are very young plants, but they're not supposed to fly directly over the houses anyway. This is the main, one of the main portions of our aid package to Colombia, the Black Hawk helicopter. We can talk about lobbying if you want later, but the Connecticut State Congressional Delegation spent a lot of time making sure that Black Hawks were supplied to Colombia rather than Hueys, which are made in Texas. They got a mix in the end, both helicopters. These are out of order, I apologize. This is a counter-narcotics helicopter with a counter-narcotics machine gun donated by the U.S. If you can tell me the difference between a counter-narcotics machine gun and a counterinsurgency machine gun, please let me know. For me, this is a distinction without a difference, and we've been arguing, I've been arguing since before Planning began, that this was more about fighting guerrillas than it was about fighting drugs. This is a view of Putumayo province, which is the southern province of Colombia, which has been the epicenter of U.S. attention. It's where most of the coca had been grown previous to Plan Colombia. And you can see from the aerial view here, this is in the tropics. It's very lush. It's very green, more shades of green than oops, John Stossel. This is what happens afterwards. It kills anything green. It dries up the food crops. You can tell it's been sprayed. The treetops are also defoliated as well. This is a before picture. I have these in the wrong order for some reason. I apologize. And Monsanto, the manufacturer of the chemical, says don't let your livestock graze on these lands once they've been sprayed. These are very poor campesino farmers. They don't have a lot of money to build fancy corrals and that sort of thing. It's hard to control what their animals eat or where they roam. I can't prove this was caused by fumigation, but it happened right after the fumigations. We weren't going to measure the amount of chemical exposed on the livestock and on the humans as well. And so the U.S. Embassy says, well, these people live in the jungle, it's humid, they get rashes, it's because it's the fungus, we didn't do it. But in fact, there's a very striking correlation if you superimpose our spraying patterns with the outbreaks of vomiting, diarrhea, infant death, rashes, that sort of thing. We spray over water sources as well. This is a pond. People raise tilapia or other fish for some protein. These ponds are now destroyed, as are other food crops. This is an agricultural school. This is where we teach people to grow other things besides coca. This is an international aid project. We sprayed that as well. You're getting the sense here. This is a very imprecise thing that we're doing, where it's a very scorched earth policy. These are the food crops: corn, bananas, papayas. These are human health effects. This baby's been sprayed. This woman I met about a week after she got sprayed. Her arms you can see the rashes. This man did exactly what we asked him to do. He stopped growing coca and instead grew peppercorns and hearts of palm. We destroyed his farm not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. I've been following this man since 2001. 4 times, 3 times directly we sprayed him, and 1 time through aerial drift from a neighboring farm. He even went so far as to put up these 30-foot poles with white flags that help spray pilots. Please don't spray me, we're not growing coca. We destroyed him nonetheless. Counter-narcotics helicopters. This is an image that's important to keep in mind. You talk about this in Congress, all you hear about is narco-terrorism. Let's go out there and defeat the narco-terrorists, let's hammer them. You never hear about campesinos, you never hear about farmers or their families. These are family farmers. And it's this generation of children that has to agree not to grow coca, not to join the illegal armed actors, the guerrillas or the paramilitaries. And if you're in the middle of a 4-decade-old civil war, this is the generation you have to reach out to and say, hey, the state offers you something else, something better. And instead of bringing these people into the fold of the state, we're driving them away. We're hitting them with a hammer and destroying their food crops and alienating them from the government. This is a very reckless policy in the midst of a 4-decade-old civil war. Finally, I'll just talk a little bit about Bolivia. I came back last night from Bolivia, where things are much more optimistic. There's the president is the first indigenous president in the hemisphere. He's a former coca grower, a union leader. He still is a union leader in the coca grower movement. But the coca there is very different from the coca in Colombia in the way it's used. It's used for traditional purposes. It's a sacred plant. It is a part of every indigenous ceremony in the Mayra and Quechua cultures. And it is not to be confused with cocaine. Coca is not cocaine. It can be used to refine into cocaine, but coca in its natural form is something that I'm actually very fond of. I chewed a lot of coca flows there. You have to, basically, at the altitudes that we're talking about. La Paz is about 2.5 miles above sea level. The air is extremely thin. It's about anywhere from 13,000 to 14,000 feet high. And in fact, the U.S. Embassy's website, I'm not sure if it still does, it did this a year ago, tell people that recommend to take coca tea once you land in La Paz because the altitude sickness, and coca is very good at fighting that. And so, do more in Q&A, but that's a rough summary of what's going on in Latin America. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We just watched a clip here from the Students for Sensible Drug Policy Conference of San Ho speaking about Plan Colombia. And this is a government policy enacted since the year 2000.
Oh, Plan Colombia?
Yes.
Yeah, 2002, I think.
Okay.
Now it's to the Andean, they've renamed it the Andean Initiative.
Right.
So that we'll forget about the failure of Plan Colombia.
Right. Well, and then what will it be called next?
Well, it often reminds me of in the old Soviet Union, they used to have 5-year plans, how they were going to arrange the world, how they were going to arrange their economics and their involvement in the world, and I guess production of weapons and space vehicles and all of these things. And 5-year plans, and every 4 years they come up with a new one. So they never really reach the end. We're doing the very same thing with this drug war. We in fact have a, see if I can recall the date, it was about 1997 that they declared that in 10 years they were going to eliminate drug abuse on the planet. And this was funneled through the UN and endorsed by everybody with a big round of applause. But of course drugs are cheaper, purer, more freely available to our children than ever before. And, it's all a scam. I mean, there's no legitimacy to this.
Well, it's not only a scam, but when you're dehumanizing women, you are completely. This is the proof in living pictures right there. When you're basically destroying not only the income of a people and of a nation and everything, but just destroying their children, destroying their crops, destroying their land. Their
livestock. Yeah.
There was even a picture of they had destroyed a crop that was planted by another group organization in order to have a legitimate illegal crop. But why is it that we even have to dust a different country in order to alleviate our own nation's problems?
And once again, it's these, I'd be careful here, hypocrites who say they know how to control the law of supply and demand. And this effort has been ongoing for 92 plus years. It has gotten worse as time goes by. It does get worse, and it will continue to get worse. How many people need to be in prison? We're up to 1.8 million arrested each year for drugs. We're over 2.2 million now behind bars. 1 in 3 black men is either in prison, on probation, on parole, or has been in prison.
Right.
And they say that in the coming generation that a young black couple's looking at the likelihood that their child faces a 1 in 2 chance of going to prison, and predominantly because of drugs and the drug gangs and the money that circulates around this black market.
Right. We're the country's highest we're the highest rate of incarceration
in the world.
It's not that, exactly, it's not that we have more criminals, it's that we have this failed policy that is set up by, like you said, the euphemism is politicians. The realistic word is probably more of hypocrites or self-believers, that they can believe that you can solve a policy just by creating new laws, by creating new illegal acts, and by saying, well, because it's illegal, then people won't do it. No, that's exactly. You have women who are avoiding health care for their children, and you have countries that are being crop sprayed, thousands of miles from here, affecting their children, affecting people with rashes on their arms, their livestock being killed.
Well, in Sanjo's discussion there, near the end, he mentioned he had just come back from Bolivia. I actually went with him on that trip. And I want to say something that I tried coca. This is the leaf You saw the one shot there, beautiful green leafy plant. And what you do, it's kind of like chewing tobacco. You put about 6 or 8 leaves between your cheek and gum. Some 5 or 10 minutes later, you might get a mild numbing of your gum. But what it really does is help your blood to absorb and distribute more oxygen, because you really need it when you're up in those mountains, like in La Paz. It's 13,000, 14,000 feet. I couldn't hardly take 10 steps up some of these 45-degree inclines without pausing. But without the coca, I couldn't go the 10 steps, because there's just no oxygen up there, and the coca helps you to just move around.
Right, that's why these indigenous people have been chewing the coca leaves, which can't give you the same high. It's something like up to 200 pounds of coca leaves can make 1 pound of coca.
Right, that's quite a bit.
Right. Yeah. Let's go ahead and answer our caller. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yeah, I have a question for the meth. Yeah, you said you tried coca, or what you say you tried?
Coca. The coca plant. It is the plant from which they make cocaine.
Oh yeah, I heard of that. Did it get you high, or?
No, there was no feeling of being high. It just, as I said, just a kind of a mild numbing of the gum, and it helps you to move around. Actually, the Indians use it down there to fight hunger, to work long hours, and to otherwise get by in a very desperate situation.
Right.
I heard that in the jungle, there's this mushroom that leopards eat, so they could enhance their hunting skills. And the nearby tribe heard about it, and then they ate the mushroom, but it makes the human effect feel like they're flying.
Well, I don't know about that, sir. But
yeah, that's 100%.
Well, thanks for calling. Thanks for letting us know about that. On to a more serious subject. We have, like you said, Sanho has gone to Colombia many times. And these were pictures from Colombia?
Yes, those were from Colombia. And you have to stop and think about it. Why is coca is legal in Bolivia? When we were down there, everyone I met, the justice minister, the Christian minister, the prisoners, and the prison guards, all chewed coca on a regular basis. It is mother coca. It is part of their religion, part of their history, part of their civilization, if you will. And for us to say it, should be banned, they can't understand that. They don't appreciate our fear of this plant, which harms nobody, and that, again, is part of their traditions and their culture.
Right. Well, Sanho made a very lucid point in the beginning of how if some other country were to come here and start spraying our corn crops or cotton crops or something for that matter.
Yeah, maybe come get our tobacco crop.
Exactly. I think some people named Philip and Morris might be a little upset by that.
Yeah,
of course.
But I think there's actually, in a way, more, legitimacy to that thought. Tobacco kills 400,000 people, 400,000 Americans, probably a million people worldwide every year.
Right.
And yet coca, in its pure and natural form, is not a killer. You can't OD on it. It's impossible.
Right. I wonder how drug policy would change if instead we sold coca leaves. And but I guess that the U.S. just isn't ready for such an experience.
It reminds me of a thought I relay from time to time, that you reach back to 1913. There was cocaine in every Coca-Cola. You could buy a chaw of opium off the shelf. Bayer heroin sold on the grocery shelf right next to Bayer aspirin at the very same price. And something else to consider. Even back then, and now especially, aspirin kills more people than heroin does every year. And yet we invest $50 to $70 billion a year fighting these drugs, when the real killers are tobacco, alcohol, doctors and pharmacists messing up our prescriptions. That kills 100,000 people a year.
Right.
Aspirin and Tylenol, about 14,000. And
right.
Of course, the one drug that the government invests most of their time going after, marijuana, never killed anybody.
Exactly. Prescription and non-prescription drugs kill more people than illicit drugs every year, hands down.
Hands down.
Recently in Houston, there was, you mentioned earlier, that huge amounts of hydroponic plants were confiscated. People were arrested. A whole chain was taken up. Also, I guess there's always the Houston-Dallas competition. This week on Monday, over 10,000 plants of about the same size, I think, of that bus was found in the Dallas-Grand Prairie border area. And what does that do for the drug war? Does that take necessarily drugs off the streets, or? Well,
the first thing I dabbled on earlier is what it is doing is we're no longer buying American. This is harvest time right now, beginning of harvest time in Mexico, and those truckloads of brick weed are going to be coming north here soon, and there won't be the good quality available for the patients or even the recreational users. There'll be a lot more of that brick weed being sold at a higher price. And so what these police have done, in essence, is work in support of the cartels, because you think Mexico's going to run out of weed? I don't think so.
Never.
And they're going to just keep shipping it up here and make more money for the cartels, because the police are saying you can't buy American.
And exactly. And in fact, Vicente Fox, the president of Mexico, at one point was trying to call for a decriminalization of small amounts of drugs. You know, even other countries are realizing how ludicrous it is. The UK, England has, now quantified their drug substances, and you can look this up. I can't exactly remember, but alcohol is actually much higher on their list of dangerous drugs, whereas, here in the U.S., it's not even considered a narcotic. It looks like we have a caller, so let's go ahead and... Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yes, ma'am. I have a comment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, go for the floor. Go down.
All right. Yeah, none of that. We are a live show, but that's pretty dumb. But we have a few minutes left here. If anyone legitimate would like to call in, then you are welcome to do so tonight or on another show.
And can I throw in 2 cents here?
Sure.
What I strive to do, I do my radio shows, I produce these videos, I'm doing a blog on the Houston Chronicle, and folks, you can reach that at drugtruth.net. But what I really am looking for is anybody who's willing to come sit here with us and defend this drug war. I don't care if you're a cop or a councilman. There is no legitimacy to this, and there is no one. I offer cash money on my radio shows to anybody who would defend this policy over the airwaves. And in 4 years plus of making that offer, no one has ever volunteered to stand up and speak for the drug war. But if you're out there, please give us a call.
It's not even volunteering. He'll even pay you to debate him intellectually and not just calling in and babbling. Yeah, but about the drug war. Another people that you should, and that's drugtruth.net?
Yes.
Okay, and when is your show in Houston?
Well, actually, this Friday, I have 2 half hours every Friday at 1 o'clock and then at 7 p.m. At the 1 o'clock show, Century of Lies this week, we'll have Pat McCann. He's the newly elected president of the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. We're going to be talking about, the old prison, the jail overcrowding, the fact that Houston, and we had an earlier discussion. He says, no, I think Red China leads the way. And I said, well, maybe so, but they put a bullet through the brain of their drug users and then harvest their kidneys. Oh. So maybe we are a little better than Red China.
We got a little bit.
Yeah, but Houston certainly leads, for the United States, leads the way, and we're going to talk about that. The fact that we are sending more people to prison
than
anybody.
Yeah.
Than anybody.
And it's not that we necessarily have more criminals. Well,
and then the 7 o'clock show is going to be an interview with Eric Sterling, who just returned from Hawaii. He was invited by the 9th Circuit federal judges to give a presentation, him and Judge Jim P. Gray.
Okay.
And
well, it looks like we have to wrap up here. We look forward to those shows. They're always excellent programming. So everyone, call your legislators. Tune in 2 weeks from now. And we very much appreciate your watching. But call your legislators and call City Council if you want to continue seeing quality programming on Houston Media Source. Thank you, and good night.
Our present policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to